G'day and welcome to another week of Bounce of the Ball. This week on the show, we actually intended on doing our NRL team reviews, but with all the media attention that the Tigers have got, we've kind of forced our hand, and they're going to get our spotlight review this week. So on the show this week, as always, I'm your host, Rob Aaron. We have Rob Bechara, as always, my co-host, and our special guest on the show this week is co-host of the Westlife Podcast and Brendan's father, the patriarch of the Bechara family, Mr. Rob Bechara. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, Rob. How are you, buddy?
Yeah,
good to be here.
Great, mate. Great. How are you this week, Brendan?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Can't complain. Just ready for another rep. Ready to get stuck in.
What week in lockdown are you guys up to?
I don't even count.
Don't even count? Lost count? I think I've just ticked over the month this week because I'm in the regional area. But yeah, we've got a bit of horizon at the end of the week apparently, so we'll see how we go. Yeah. Anyway, so like I mentioned at the top, we intended on doing our team reviews, and because of the media attention this week, we kind of had a hand forced with the Tigers. There's been a tsunami of press regarding speculation around Madge, the future of Brooksy even at the club. We'll get into that as well. So it's been a bit of a shit show, to put it a bit bluntly. So what are your thoughts on it, guys? Where do you want to start with this conversation on our season review of the Tigers? Should we start from the beginning and work our way towards the end of the season, or do you want to start with what's happening in the media now?
Yeah, I think I sort of prepared a bit more for the media stuff. Happy to go through the season as well, but I think the media stuff is probably the stuff that's on the forefront of my mind at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the stuff to get into while it's all fresh. Yeah.
Yeah. So if everyone's good, I might just kick it off. I've jotted a few notes down here, but yeah, as you alluded to, it's been an absolute shit show. And the first point I've made here really is that I was watching 360 last night, and there was a point made by Kenny that, not to overthink this and not to make too much of it. Like all bottom 8 clubs that miss the finals are doing this review. Well, why do we seem to be the only team that's talking about it? And I know you're going to allude on it a bit more, Rob, but Lee's in the media talking about, just giving all these comments about, we're not just speculating on one person's future and it's just a normal review. Well, like I just said, 20 seconds ago, we seem to be the only club talking about it like it's something not normal. So, I don't really get the whole review. I guess the second point I've made is that I'm sure Dad will allude on this a bit more as well. The way it's being run, it's not independent, and I sort of compare it to any experiment you want to do. If you're trying to work out what variable, is causing a certain reaction in any experiment, whether it's scientific or just anything in life, how you're meant to work out which variable gives you that reaction if you don't remove that variable from the experiment itself. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a bit confusing that it's being run by the CEO when he could be the problem itself. So I don't really understand that. I've got a few more points jotted down, but I'll probably just throw it over to you guys and comment on those two points first and what your thoughts on that are.
Well, for me, obviously the point about the internal review, that's quite massive. I don't know if Rob saw it or not, but I put it to Buzz Rothfield late on Sunday night, and he kind of ran with it for 24 hours because he actually re-quoted what I said and went with it, and you mentioned it on 360 on Monday night as well.
Yeah.
I got to speak to Lee Hadjipantelis Monday morning. I made a point of getting his number and ringing him and speaking to him on behalf of my uncle, who's a major sponsor of the club, because he's not happy with things at all. And it gave me a voice to go to him and just have a chat. So, without going into too much detail, Lee insists that review is a regular review. It's not meant to be, an investigation like we had where Brian Smith was, sanctioned by Grant Mayer to do an investigation. It's nothing like that. He reckons it's an everyday review. What bothers me is this morning I listened to Lee on 1170 SEN radio.
Yeah,
he was saying that when he was pushed, is Madge going to be coach at the start of the year? He truthfully said, I can't give you that answer right now, but that to me is damning of what this whole internal investigation is about. Because if it's just a regular investigation, he should be saying, there's, Madge is fine. There's nothing. We'll just go through the process. We'll see what we think is right or wrong, who's to blame, et cetera, et cetera. and that would make more sense. But the fact that he denied that, or he couldn't say that Madge would be there or not, that kind of rang some alarm bells for me today. So I don't know what you guys think of that, but or if any of you heard that as well today, but it was quite damning, I thought.
Well, yeah, just to comment on that before I throw it over to you, Rob. That was sort of my whole point. Like, if it's just a normal review, why aren't you hearing from the other 7 clubs? Like, we're the only ones that seem to make it anything but normal. So it's baffling me.
Yeah, I think it speaks a lot to the actual, just the nature of the club itself, and how I know that they're too eager to please the media, in a sense as well. There's a lot of knee-jerk reactions that are always occurring to at the club. Like, so for example, I'll just get us started on a bit of a timeline. Last week, Monday, we had a story about Mitchell Pearce speculation coming back to the club. We also had something about Brooks in there as well. There was a story. We had the next day a legends talking about Benny Elias and Steve Roach giving advice to the Broken Tigers. Wednesday, we had the Packer retirement. Thursday, we had news of the season review that we're talking about right now. Friday, I think, was a bit of a quiet day. Then we had the Shamus article on part 1 on Saturday, and then part 2 on Sunday. And then since then, as you saw, you were keeping count this morning of the articles that were popping out. I think we're up to 7 or 8 before 9 o'clock this morning, weren't we?
Yeah, I was up to 8, and I haven't been on Twitter for a couple of hours, so I just let it be.
There's no point in bothering really keeping track of it anymore. It's just this constant flow. It's a tsunami, and I think it speaks to the amateur hour kind of. Like, I don't mean to disrespect the people who are actually running the show there, but they're just not. They might be, and I'm sure they are fantastic in their line of business, what they do, but they've come into the football business and they're kind of not understanding the culture of how you conduct yourself. Like, I'm going to use the example of Nick Politis here. We've barely heard from Nick Politis. Like, we heard from him the other week about the Latrell Mitchell incident, but even that was supposed to be kind of like a private conversation that he was having on a Roosters podcast that kind of got leaked out to the public. So he thought he was speaking amongst friends on that thing as well. It's not like he goes and offers these, caveats to the public readily on a weekly or daily basis or hourly basis, it seems these days with the Tigers, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, it's just... And then that also speaks again to a lot of the criticism that's being thrown at Madge at the moment about him being able to attract players. And I think that we've got to really, really put the microscope on the front office when it comes to this. Like, there was speculation that McGuinness walked because I'm not sure how true the story is. Like, it was mentioned, I think, on the was it the Discord server the other day that apparently McGuinness was shunned. Didn't even know who he was, had to ask him who he was when he walked in. Like, it just doesn't feel like the guy ingratiates himself on the players as like other CEOs do. Yeah. Like, you hear the way that people talk about Nick Politis, like Teddy and all that. They love him, and there's obviously a fantastic relationship there. I haven't heard a single player talk in a positive sense or even mention Justin Pascoe in that light. So I don't know about you guys, but it's not I think the issues run a lot deeper, and the people who are holding the magnifying glass at the moment are the ones who actually should have it pointed on them.
Exactly.
I've spoken to a couple of his peers, and obviously I can't name them, but they don't think too much of Justin Pascoe. Yeah. So it's pretty damning. My problem with Justin is the accountability for the mistakes of the past. So you got to remember, and it's probably not the nicest thing to say, but right now my agenda is for Justin Pascoe not to be CEO anymore. That's I think the biggest thing we could do to move forward as a club, even if he's employed and moved on into the corporate side of things in terms of getting sponsorships and all that. I don't think he should be the face of our organisation. Yeah. That said, if I'm being honestly fair, what we've done the last 12 months has been fantastic up until this witch hunt just started, because I think we've fixed our cap problems to a degree. There was no choice but to go with the youth. Surely Lee and Justin and the board realised we did not have a finals squad at the start of the year, and we've just got to give even if Madge isn't technically the right coach, I think we've just got to see it out. We can't keep changing. We can't keep going backwards. We can't give, like, if you or Brendan took over as coach tomorrow, like I said last night on the Westlife podcast, you'll be given the first year as, it's only his first year. They're not your players, they're Madge's players. And we go back another few years. I think, we could be on the cusp of something. Like in a couple of years from now, we might have a fantastic team. Like, it's probably not the exact comparison, but if you look at Richmond AFL, the heads were like, everyone was screaming for Damien Hardwick to get sacked. They lost their last game of the year to North Melbourne by 1,000, to exaggerate slightly. And they stuck by him. They knew he was a good person. They trusted his processes. And, we won 3 out of 4 premierships, the next 4 years. So you don't know how close things are. But I think if you're a realist, we're not going to be competitive next year. When I say competitive, for the 8, I'm sure we'll have our moments and our hot weeks and what have you. But I don't know what you guys think of that. But I just think what disappointed me was, I thought, you know what, I'm not crazy about Lee. I'm not crazy about Justin or the board and the things they've done. But you know what? They fixed a pretty good mess last year of our cap. I really thought they did a good job. And I
completely agree with that. Yeah.
So they're actually shooting themselves in the foot, and they're proving that they don't believe in their process and the what would you say, like their ideas of how to move forward. They've gone with an idea and now they want to change it again.
Yeah.
And we're in 2021. We're meant to be a professional organisation. We got fans screaming at each other. I can tell you now, I know Justin Pascoe feeds Michael Shamus. That 2-part article was from Justin Pascoe because he wants to get rid of Michael Maguire. There's no mention of Pascoe's, mistakes or anything like that in the article. As I said last night, every time Pascoe coughs, Pascoe coughs, Shamus gets the cold. So it's just, we don't want to see that as a fan base. Like, we want to lose. We hear a few bad reports about the game and we move on. We're getting bombed with, like you said, 8 articles already today prior to 9 o'clock. There were about 12 or 13 yesterday. It's just all negative, and it doesn't need to be negative. I actually see a lot of good things the club did this year, but they've just opened this can of worms that I don't know how we get out of it looking respectable. It's a really tough situation.
Yeah, the whole problem with the media too is that there's a lot of recency bias happening. So everyone, deservedly so, you've got the Canterbury game fresh in everyone's brain. Like that's there's no point going into that. It was so horrific.
Just before we move on to any next point, just to touch on that top 8, I completely agree. And we discussed it a bit at home about how, one of the last New South Wales Cup game we played before the comp got shut down, like we had 8 of those plays in our 17 against the Bulldogs. My one issue with that is, and I 100% agree with you, like if you looked at it just objectively from the start of the year with how much youth we had, we shouldn't have made the 8. But at the same time, it probably didn't help us with how shit the quality of the competition was this year. Like that, I know you think, that our expectations should not have been to make the 8, and I agree with that. But I do think the way it planned out, we could have made it. And injuries didn't help that either. Like Dane Laurie and seem to always. I don't know what you guys thought as well. I don't want to digress too much, but he didn't look right the last couple of weeks. I mentioned it a bit at home when we were watching the games. And obviously he did his ACL in that last game that he played. But yeah, I don't know. I just think I'm with you. Your point was correct, but I still think the way the comp panned out, we should have done better. But I'm with you. The expectation before the year should not have been that high.
But Brendan, as I said last night, you probably haven't heard the Westlife thing yet, but Dano had 3 games at Penrith last year. I think Stefano had 1 at Para. Yeah. And who was the other guy? Sean Bloor had 1 for us when we played Para last year. 3 of our guys that we're looking as our future, 5 NRL games between them prior to the start of the season. Like, come on, what's our expectations? Now, I want to ask you, Rob, because this is what I'm worried about. This is where the clubs put themselves in a real corner. Let's say we keep Madge, which is wonderful, right? Let's look forward the next year. We're not going to make the 8. We're going to be bottom 4, in my opinion. He's just going to get shunted next year. If we're going to go with Madge, we've got to say 2 more years. We're not going to do well next year. Let him cultivate the crop that he planted, and give him a go. And the other thing too, the players aren't going to be able to perform under pressure. If the spotlight's on every week, Tigers have started 0-4, 0-5, 0-6. They have to have an understanding that we've got a young team. Unless we add some superior talent to the squad, we're in a real pickle. They did not need to do this. So they either go with Madge for 2 years, in my opinion, or I don't want them to shunt him. But if they're going to shunt him now. Don't shunt him in 12 months.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I want them to stay strong and see out his contract for the 2 years that are left. I want to see what this actually looks like. There's no point restarting now. I don't think we're actually going backwards, to be honest. I know it appears that way. Yeah, it does appear that way because of injuries, but this is going to speak to something I'm going to allude to a bit later on about the macro problem with the NRL as a whole, let alone just the micro problem that we're focusing on in the West Tigers. But I'm actually really confident with our future. So there was a turn, like you mentioned it on the podcast last night. There was a sliding doors moment in our season. When we played Souths earlier on in the year, if that try gets awarded to Brooksy, that was probably the best performance I think we had all year as a team.
Agreed.
The Penrith game was fantastic, but the Souths game was at that moment. That moment they'd instilled a bit of belief in themselves, and they went out there and they stuck it to a top 4 team. The problem was that as good as that game was and as amazing as they performed, that loss right at the buzzer would have been so deflating for the young players, and they wouldn't have been able to instill any confidence out of the game and take it forward. Now, that decision, flip of a coin, goes the other way, sliding door moment, I think we're a top 8 prospect. I really do. On the cusp at least. And if injuries go our way, everything can change off momentum and confidence. People play a bit more with a bit more intent. They have a bit more belief. You just see differences in players. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Brendan alluded to it. The comp wasn't strong this year, and if we'd have got that win, we were up 8 points, 14-6 with 15 minutes to go.
Yeah.
So the game was in our keeping. So it wasn't just losing in Golden Point. We were the better team most of the night. If you want to be pro West Tigers, Latrell Mitchell should have been sin-binned or sent off as well. So if we'd have had a 10-minute period without a man, we might have even had that game iced, much earlier. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It is a sliding doors moment, and it was really deflating. But what are your thoughts there, B?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And just to what Rob alluded to about the confidence thing, I think that sort of showed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. We went out against Manly the next week, and I think we led
completely different team.
5 minutes.
Yeah,
and then got absolutely walloped.
Yeah, they just couldn't take anything from that game forward, confidence-wise, and it's such a shame because they put in the best performance they put in all year in my mind. So yeah.
In saying that, I guess the next best example though of a win that should have given us confidence was the Penrith one, and if anything, that showed the next 3 weeks we were pretty awful. So I'm with you. I genuinely, I'm optimistic enough to believe that could have turned our season around. But at the same time, that Penrith game should have done it as well, and it really didn't. We were ordinary. The refs actually really ruined us against Para, but even that was like a 20-something point loss, and then not much needs to be said about the Melbourne game. So,
I stand corrected, but that Penrith game could have even been one of those games. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong or not, but did we not have the bye the week after as well? After that game, because what I'm trying to say is when you come off a big win like that, if you play the next week, you can just take that right in. And I think just having a couple of weeks off might have just sort of killed that possible momentum that we had.
Just taking the wind out of the sails a little bit. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'd have to confirm. I don't know if you could get the schedule up, Rob, but I don't know why. I've got the memory that we had the bye after the Melbourne game, and then we went into Brisbane.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the bye was just before the Melbourne.
You're definitely going to need to look at that schedule because I thought we played Saints after South. so you got me confused now because I thought we'd lost. I thought we'd lost to the Cowboys, and I thought, you know what, South took us a bit easy because we lost to the Cowboys, and the Cowboys had started 0-4. So I thought maybe we were expecting to get pumped. I mean, I know I went out to a family function thinking there's no way we're going to win. I don't leave the TV if the Tigers are, if the Tigers are on, we're not going anywhere.
We definitely had the Cowboys before South, but I'm going back to Tales of Tiger Town. I remember they just played that Anzac Day music for the Manly game, and then I think we beat St George because we played Gold Coast the week after we beat St George.
You're probably right, mate. You're probably right. You're a lot younger than me. Your memory's better.
Back to the original point. I'm with you. It was just, I don't know. I guess the expectation of the season, you're right, was probably skewed by how poor the comp was, which didn't help us. But I mean, aside from that, I mean, that sort of just sums it up. But as Rob gets that schedule up to confirm, I might just bring in my next point and get your thoughts on it, Dad. We might have touched on it a little bit, but another thing that I've taken out of this whole review is the whole Tim Sheens aspect. So everyone's, looking at him as potentially replacing, Madge as the new coach if he was to get sacked, and him being the saviour. Don't get me wrong, I think he's going to be a great influence for Madge, assuming he sticks around, and I'm sure his input will be good. But I've just jotted some notes now. So he obviously coached us for a 10-year period. We made 3 finals, which in fairness we take over the last 10 years. But correct me if I'm wrong, from an administration point, that period after we made the finals in 2011 and we lost a couple of those players to Cronulla, was that not based on his administration of back-ending some contracts, like the Hino, Gibbs, Fafita sort of era?
Yeah, it would have been him putting pressure on Humphreys to back end those contracts because we'd missed the finals from 2006 to 2009. There was a heap of pressure on Sheensy. So, if I was trying to be a little bit objective, we would have been pushing that cap limit pretty hard in 2010. Like we had a pretty top-notch squad there. So that's a possibility. I think with Sheensy in 2012. I think the fact that we'd gone so close in 10 and 11 and we didn't win, and St. George, were kind of playing that pretty boring sort of footy with the field goals and penalty goals and Jamie Soward and all that sort of stuff. He went away from our adventurous style of play. So the fact that he went away from that play, I think that didn't gel well with the playing group. And then that kind of was where he kind of went on the outer. And then obviously when he left, we kind of offered him that role that he's being offered now. And he took that as a slap in the face, and we had to pay him out something like $900,000 over a few years, and that's how that finished up. That's how I remember it anyway.
I've heard that he was given reassurances that it wouldn't be cap issues with backloading, and he was kind of misled. And that kind of put us in some dire straits financially. But I'm not too sure the truth in that. It's just something that I've heard. That just to check on that. That was we had a bye after the Souths game, and then we did play the Broncos the next week. That was the super when we all kind of got transferred up to Queensland. So we played that one round down, or a couple of rounds down south, and then everyone had to get out of Dodge and get up to Queensland. I remember that actually. I thought that was a tell the state they're going in lockdown without telling the state they're going in lockdown moment. But
what are your thoughts on the Sheensy stuff, Rob? Because I don't know. I'm with I think a lot of the fans have seen him as the saviour, and don't get me wrong, I think he'll be a positive influence. But I'm just maybe I was too young at the time, but I just don't remember that being the happiest of endings.
Okay. So Sheensy, I kind of have a bias affiliation towards. He's both the architect of the saddest day of my life and the greatest day of my life. He was the coach during 1989 grand final, Tigers and Canberra, and then again, of course, he was our coach in 2005. The guy's a genius. I've been following a little bit of his career over in England. I'm just a bit of a Sheensy stan, I must say. So to be fair, but I really do think he's one of the smartest minds in the game. Him and Wayne Bennett are up there on par with each other in my mind. I've got a lot of time for him. I've got a lot of time for what he can do for the club. I don't want him to be our coach, but I want him to have, in my mind, what would be the perfect situation is that we acknowledge that Hartigan is probably mostly responsible for constructing what are the poorer elements of our roster, and that Sheens actually takes on his role as well when he comes to the club, as long as him and Madge can have some sort of amicable, workable relationship, and they can kind of like bite the bullet with each other, and that could be the best power pairing I could ever think for coaching the Tigers. With I just think that like Brooksy with Sheens would be pretty handy, but that's something we're going to get to in a minute. I have sailed well and truly from Brooks Island after the other day's effort. That was just too poor for me. There was just nothing there. There was nothing endearing taking from that game. So that's me on Sheens. But what about you, Rob? What do you think about Sheens coming back? Are you confident or happy? Apprehensive?
I was happy. I was happy. Look, when he finished in 2012, I couldn't wait for him to leave. I just thought he wasn't Tim Sheens anymore. He was just so focused on trying to win a premiership. He would have sold his soul to get that premiership, and he just went away from all his beliefs. So I kind of thought he was overplaying our forwards quite a bit as well. So back in those days, 60 and 70-minute props just didn't exist. And I just remember him playing Keith Galloway for like 65 minutes. And he, you know, if Galloway was a racehorse, he kind of turned him in from a sprinter to a stayer. You know, he just lost that punch and that bounce and those offloads, and because he had to grind out more minutes. So at the time, I was happy he left. If Sheensy does take the coaching job for whatever reason, that's another indictment on our club, because they've brought him back for the pathways and then they throw him into a coaching role. So again, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, has he got the brains to be a coach? Of course he does. Would he be able to work with kids? He worked with a lot of kids in 2005, blended with some wonderful experience. So he could do the job, but like, you've got him back for pathways, keep that, because that's our only way out. No one's going to get our team out of the mess next year, I'm telling you. And this is the other thing too, if I can just digress for 1 second. If we get a new coach and we finish, say, 15th or 16th next year, Pasco's gone at the end of next year. And we start again, you know, we've got another CEO and a lack of trust in what's this organisation about, blah, blah, blah. So I just think, to me, I feel like we ripped the place apart last year. Everyone's saying to rip it apart now. We did that last year. We did some good things. We started from scratch last year. Admittedly, you know, we got James Roberts and, you know, that was just a bit of a roll of the dice. He was on cheap money. But I feel like late last year, we kind of ripped it apart and tore it all down and were building up. And this is why this whole, you know, internal investigation just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. I think bringing in James Roberts has a bit of an ulterior motive as well. So Madge is trying to actually build up the Tigers as the place for Indigenous football as well. He's brought in Dane.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great thing. It's a fantastic thing. It actually like prevents Souths from just being the sole, you know, known Indigenous club in the competition. I think it's a fantastic thing, and it can bring a lot of talent through to our club. So that like I say, it sounds a bit diabolical, and you know, when you say ulterior motive, but no, he's like got good intentions behind that motive. I think so. Yeah, it's and I think he's a strong benefit. If we're reading lately too, his brother's coming through, so there could be some plans there to entice him down towards to play with his brother. And apparently they're all good mates with Dane Laurie as well, so they're a good knit group. And mate, Dane Laurie, in my mind, he's the future of our club. You kind of alluded to it before, how we do have some stars in the making in our club that they're progressing very, very well. Like Steph, Dano is a legit superstar. I could see him replacing Teddy if Teddy was injured one time and they didn't want to stick Turbo there and they wanted to keep him in it centre in a few years in Origin. You know what I mean? I could see his development getting to that point. Dano is just an actual elite talent in my mind, and I think we've got to kind of build around him and strengthen him there. Yeah, my big issue at the club, I think I've alluded to a few times, is the hooker position. But yeah, I've digressed a bit there. So
that's all good. We agree with you. We want to throw the sink at Brandon Smith. We want to throw everything at him if we can.
Yeah,
like that'd be the perfect player for us.
I'm a big Jake Simpkin guy as well, but I'm with you. If one of those Melbourne guys is on the block, I'm for sure in on that.
Yeah, so good news story. Did you notice that Harry Grant came out actually in defence of Madge, saying he's actually responsible for kind of the player he is today, and that's something the board should be paying attention to. That that elite players in the competition, you know, representatives, at the highest level are touting his name out there. So I think we should be paying attention to players like that instead of the ones who are kind of, in my mind, you know, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I'd say that they tanked that game on the weekend to get rid of Madge. You know what I mean? And a few people have kind of touted that idea around. I don't subscribe to that, but they're a kind of team that doesn't act, you know, you kind of alluded to this before, Rob, that they don't work under pressure at all. They kind of go to water really, really quickly. And I could see Madge having a conversation with them like, our entire system that we've got building here is kind of dependent in a sense on how well we perform in this game today. I could imagine him saying something like that to him before the Bulldogs game. And instead of aiming up, they'd go to water. That's just the kind of mental strength that I see in the majority of them younger boys at the club at the moment. And there's a few that I just would not sign again next year. And we have cleared out some dead wood. We've got a lot of money there to work with. It's just, Yeah, there's not really many options on the market at the moment. Shane alluded to last night that we should be going to England, and I tend to agree with him. I think that's where the Tigers have generally found their best investments in the past.
But surely Sheensy's there. He'd find those guys. Like, he knows what his role's going to be. He's got to be working on that right now. If that's a great idea, and I'd agree with it. But he's got to be looking at that right now.
Yeah.
Brendan, you mentioned last night about players Madge developed. I don't want to steal your thunder, but do you want to mention a couple of those guys that you said to me? I think you mentioned Joey Leilua and Madison and a few others. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Oh, Luch. Oh, yeah, no. So we were watching 360 last night. It's one of the narratives I know you want to touch on Brooksy as well before we finish with the Tigers, Rob, but I had a couple more points here. But there was a point that, that Tigers are meant to be a development club, but at the same time, we don't do that. We were just talking about it last night. That, the guys on 360 on the panel were saying, who goes to the Tigers and gets better. I think you tweeted it, Dad. You've probably got the names better than me, but I don't know about you guys. I certainly know which version of Ryan Madison's career I would like out of the Roosters, Tigers, and Para one. I think the Tigers one was the best. 100%. You alluded to it, Dad. Luch has turned into an 80-minute. I know there's been a lot of Tigers fans actually on Twitter that I've seen are hammering him for his defense, and I'm not going to shade away from that because I do think he's a bit of a liability there.
He's being overplayed, but...
Yeah, but I think he's, we turned him in to when we signed him, it was this is a risky signing, very up the Tigers' alley. And we've turned him into one of the better edge back rowers, I think, in the game, especially in offense, in terms of a strike weapon. Who else was there? I know you don't want to steal the thunder.
There's Stefano, there's Safaf, there's they're only small improvements, but they're improvements. If you don't have the right mix there, we've also said a lot. There's no leadership on the field in terms of talk. Yeah. So we're missing it. We're missing a talker, and our best talker on the field we saw on Tiger Town was Robbie in a blue shirt, Robbie Farah. Yeah. It was crazy. It's a shame he couldn't go up in the bubble because we kind of fell apart after that. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of brings us to what's coming next year already. So we've got Hastings and Gildert coming. So I don't know a terrible lot about Gildert, but I have been following Hastings quite a bit. And yeah, we're not going to have an issue with leadership on the field next year when we've got Hastings there. That guy is not a shrinking flower. He will come out and he'll say and put blokes in their spot and tell them where to be immediately. He's quite a good pickup for us, I believe.
Yeah, everything I've seen
there, Rob.
Yeah,
I'm trusting you, Rob, because I haven't seen much of him.
Yeah, I was just about to say, anyway. I haven't seen him play, but everything I've seen on his social media and just all the reviews from England about him is that he's just a real, in terms of attitude, it's almost like Adam Dewey, like he's just going to come in with a lot of intensity, and you'll see that on the field. So, yeah, I mean, you said you're off Brooks Island. I'm with you. I'm not off it. I think he's still a great talent. Me and Dad sort of have touched on it a bit at home. When not sure if he's a 7 personally, he's probably more of a 6. And I really just hope he succeeds somewhere else because I think in a good club with a really good roster, I think he could be a really key piece for someone. So.
Yeah, so
I broke some news last night, and we aren't shopping him around, but his manager is shopping him around. So, but I know the club think very highly of Brooksy, and they said exactly what you said, Rob. I spoke to Lee on Monday, and he said if Luke did leave, he's going to succeed wherever he goes. But he's not a game manager, and we need a game manager.
Yeah. I just don't know if him and Dewey, as much as I love both of them, I'm not sure if they're the combination. I think they're too similar. And if anything, I don't know if this is a hot take. Dewey actually strikes me as more of a game manager. I know his running game is phenomenal, but Dewey just strikes me as someone who, maybe it's just because I see him as more of a vocal leader, but he actually strikes me as someone who, if one of them had to turn into a 7, he'll probably direct you around the park a bit better.
Yeah, he's more assertive and confident in his play than Brooksy is. Yeah.
But the thing is, he can do it all. He's got that long cutout pass. He can break the line. He's got everything, so that's probably why we don't see him as a game manager. He's just one of those talented guys that can, wherever you put him, he's going to succeed. He's probably our best centre in the club, really, too. And I've said that before. And back to what you said earlier, Rob, that's probably another reason why we might keep James Roberts, not just because of the Aboriginal connection, but the fact that Tom Talau did the ACL. We're really thin in the centre, even with Gildart coming. So that might be another reason that might have saved James Roberts' career.
Yeah, I think so. And apparently he's a bit of a favourite of Madge's as well. That's a bit of a funny thing anyway. But just back to Brooksy. So the rumour is at the moment that Brooksy is being shopped to the Bulldogs by his manager. The Bulldogs have expressed an interest in him, saying they'd like to see him paired with Burton. So they'd probably be looking to trade one of their assets or maybe possibly getting the Tigers to pay a bit of his wage. But I don't see us looking to release him. So we're not shopping him around. So he'll probably just have to ask to get released from his contract. And I don't think we'd have to pay him out in that sense. I'm not too sure. But
yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah, but the whole narrative. See, I want to get back to something that's been going on for years. You touched on this the other week with me, and I've had a real good think about it too, Rob. When I was on the Westlife pod, there's this narrative around Brooksy that's persisting that it's kind of never his fault. Do you know what I mean? So it started with when he first came to the club, it was Robbie. Robbie was too dominant, and last year it was Benji. Benji's too dominant. You know what I mean? So we've kind of freed him up a bit now, and now Madge is too hard on him. It's like, when is this kid going to actually take some accountability and just stand up and not be looking... I don't know, I think a lot of excuses get made for him that kind of just... I'm sick of them, in my sense. They've just been persisting for too long, and at some point, you've got to stand up and show your greatness as a player, do you know what I mean? And not be looking for excuses all the time. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, guys.
Yeah, I might just touch on that first, Dad, before the thought leaves my mind.
Sure.
It sort of goes back to my point about what I was saying about the internal review and the CEO running it himself, in the sense of, I was saying, if you want to work out what, is causing a certain reaction in an experiment, you've got to remove every variable. And like you said, we've now removed Robbie, we've removed Benji. And this is what I was just saying, 2 minutes ago. Like, I still love Luke Brooks. And if he was at our club next year, I've got no issue with it. But I'm sort of with you. I just think that the time's come to move on. And he's been the only constant, I guess, that's been a part of this squad for the last 8 years, since his debut back in 2013 or whatever it was. So I'm sort of with you. I personally probably one of those people that makes excuses for him, because I love him and I think he's come a long way in his defence.
I'm guilty of it too, mate.
Turned into the general that he was meant to be, but I still see the talent. So it would be sad for me to see him go, but I'm with you. I think it's sort of the right time, and it's come for him to move on.
Yeah, I don't know if in a way, I kind of still want him to be there. I don't think he's a game manager. I did defend him quite a bit this year, and there were a couple of games in the middle of the season where we got smashed, and every time Brooksy got the ball, he looked classy. Like, he really looked classy and making some overlaps and running through gaps, and you're losing by 30, 40 points, and he's still having good games behind a beaten pack, which is really hard for a halfback to do. But he lost me with that Cronulla game. I actually timed it, and he didn't put, we were in that red zone for all the first half. Every time we went there, he never put a kick in, didn't try and force a repeat set. And, I was watching the 2005 highlights the other day. I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's a Laurie Daly interview of Tim Sheens, Scotty Prince, Benji, Scando, and Hodjo, looking back at the year. And it was actually done at the end of 2005. And they're talking about the grand final and, how did we feel when we were down 6-0, et cetera, et cetera. And Scotty Prince got in there and he goes, all I was thinking about was building pressure, getting repeat sets, putting him under the pump. And, obviously he put that chip kick in the in goal where Bowman does a flick pass to Matty Bowen and Bryce Gibbs scores, and we kind of turn the game from there. And that's the thing that we don't do as a club. We don't build pressure. So I'm hoping, Rob, that Jackson Hastings fills that role. But if Dewey's the game manager that Brendan's saying, then maybe there is a role that way. But then, Dewey's got to be the guy with his hands on the steering wheel and running that show. But I feel like Dewey's talents are so good. Yeah, I don't want him to play like Adam Reynolds, just running to the line and copying a hit and passing it. I think he's got more than that in his game. I don't know what you guys think.
I agree. I want him to be our 6. All I was saying is, if that's the halves combination going forward, I'd actually be more inclined to put the 7 on Dewey Sharp. And I'm with you. And you sort of alluded to Sheensy trying to do whatever it took to win a comp. Correct me if I'm wrong. He tried to turn Benji into a 7 before he left.
He did. He created.
And he was coming off a Golden Boot in 2010 as like the most entertaining, electrifying player that we'd seen in some time. So, yeah, I'm with you. I want Dewey to be the 6, and I'm hoping Hastings can fill that role. I'm just saying, if that's the halves combination going forward, I've got more faith in Dewey leading us as a 7 than Brooks.
Yeah, well, historically, that's why Benji... Unfortunately, the biggest problem our club ever did... I remember Tim Sheen saying this at the end of 2005. if Scott Prince isn't retained for 2007, I'm not going to be the coach. That's how much he knew Scott Prince was important to us. And then obviously Princey wanted to go back, to the Gold Coast because wife's family's based in Queensland and all that sort of stuff. So, he signed with the Gold Coast, left in 2007, and we had no playmaker, mate. Like we tried John Morris, we tried a few things. We had Robert Louis had a couple of good years there. Like it's probably in our semi-final losses, he was our best player, but he really wasn't the halfback. We never had that general. So Sheens had to think of another way of how do I get these guys around the park, and so he turned Benji into like that Prince role, but then Benji lost that unbelievable running game, which he never really got back. So it's just one of those.
He did do quite well though. I keep seeing the stat every time, just to digress a little bit, when South play and they show Cody Walker's try assist and compare it to the best seasons ever, I think Benji's second from his 2012 year. We didn't even make the 8, and I think he had the second best try assist year ever. So.
Well, he got punted last year and he was in the top 5. Yeah. I'm sure Benji could have been third last year, but I know he was at least in the top 5, and we still punted him. So, it is. And like he got punted for his defence, and look at our defence this year, So I think he could have helped. He could have helped develop a lot of those young guys. And the sad part for me is I don't think he'll come back to mentor the kids. Had he retired with us, I feel like we would have given him a role at the club, and he could have been developing some of these players. And Benji's learned from his mistakes. Like Benji was brash. And I remember the year he retired, he just refused to run the ball. Like I remember him getting the ball once at first receiver, and he literally turned around to hand it to someone. No one was ready, and he still refused to run with the ball. I think it was against Gold Coast, up on the Gold Coast. And the only time he ran the ball was when Brooksy made his debut, ironically. They moved him out to the centres, and he had to run the ball. And I'm like, where's this been all year? So anyway.
That was at SCG, I think, against St George.
It was at the SCG. It was a great day.
I was there. I was the coming of Brooksy.
It was probably Brooksy's best game, believe it or not, which is just sad. But he was such an instinctive player, and I think Jason Taylor just took all that out of his game and killed his confidence, and he's never really quite got it back.
And this is why there's all this hype around Brooksy. This is why there's all this hype around Brooksy. Everyone saw that as his first game. We're like, this kid's an absolute superstar. They were touting him as the next great hope for New South Wales when I first watched him play. I can remember it. It was just...
the next Andrew Johns.
Yeah, and now you think it's like, in retrospect, it was all a bit hyperbolic, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. And I've made a couple more points just before we get onto our finals previews. I just want to get your thoughts on your take on this supposed Madge's record at the Tigers. Like I think it's 26 wins or something and 48 losses. Am I the only one? I know you've sort of believed in it a bit, Dad, as well, that if we just go back to 2019, I don't think we realised just how close we were. We missed the finals. I went back and had a look at the ladder. I remember we had to beat Cronulla in that last game. We missed the finals by a point because Brisbane drew with the Warriors a couple of weeks prior. And not only that, we had the Robbie Farah injury, which was huge. I know
Robbie broke his leg, didn't he?
Yeah, you were a big believer in that, Dad, costing us the finals. But not only that, am I the only one remembering a game towards the back end of the year where we played the Bulldogs and Morovsky just misses like a conversion from 10 metres left of the sticks against the 12-man Bulldogs.
That was the same game.
I don't know. I'm just wondering. I guess the point I'm trying to make is everyone's sort of shitting on Madge's record as West Tigers head coach. Do you honestly believe that we're having this review to this extent today if we'd made the finals 2 years ago in his first year?
You want to know the truth? I actually think if we make the finals in 2019,
Madge gets sacked already.
Madge gets sacked already, yes.
Yeah, because we've gone so far backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've gone that far backwards. So, but going back to what you said, that Canterbury game, Robbie got injured. Before that, Moses Mbai was playing in the centres from memory. He got injured in like the 4th or 5th minute after we scored the try. I think he scored the try, got injured scoring the try or in the lead up to the try, whatever it was. He came off. And then we made this ridiculous... The game was gone. We made a ridiculous comeback led by Benji in the last few minutes. And then obviously Momirovski shanked that kick. And if you guys remember the week after against Manly, the first 20 minutes was arguably the worst football I've ever seen from both teams. Like the game was just there to be won. Robbie Farah wasn't there controlling the game. I'm pretty sure Tom Talau might have debuted that night and he got injured. And he came off early. And then eventually when, it was like, well, who wants to turn up and play some footy? And Manly kind of got going from about just before half time. And the scoreline won't look like we could have won that game, but we would have won both those games. And even if we lost to Cronulla, we were in. So yeah, it's like one of those moments, man, that we were blessed to have Robbie and Benji on peanuts in 2019, and because they were worth triple what they were getting paid, and it just didn't work out, unfortunately.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that other point you were mentioning before?
You had another point there, Brendan.
Oh no, that was sort of it. But my last point, I had 2 points down, but we sort of touched on it earlier. My last point I made was that we were talking about the expectations for next year. Like I'm with you. The sad part is I've written down that he should really be judged on the development next year. But I'm with you, Dad. I think it's just a ticking time bomb. Like it's unfortunately the expectations are now too high. Like even if we sticks around for another year, I don't see us making the 8. So. Yeah, that was sort of because next year is really the first year. I know everyone's on 360 was alluding to, but he re-signed all these players. Well, you got to fill roster spots somehow. And somewhat the whole reason we haven't been able to attract any of the big guns is because it's not his fault. Like all the recruitment stories about Tavita Pangai, like he loved Madge. He called Madge to let him know he was signing with the Bulldogs. That's how much respect he had. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, the spotlight should be on the CEO and even Adam Hartigan. I know you touched on him, Rob, that you're not his biggest fan, but the guys recruiting should be the ones under the spotlight. So yeah, that was sort of the last point I had. It's just a shame because he should be judged on 2022, but at the same time, 2022 is not going to be enough. So it's just a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Well, let him see out his contract. Like give him the 2 years.
I'm with you. I'd love to as well, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like if you rock up as coach tomorrow, you're told, you know what, mate, you've got a pack of kids. We haven't been able to sign anyone. It's your first year as a full-time head coaching job. For example, if it's Serraldo, I'm just using that as an example. Yeah. I think Green's a backward step, but yeah, you just then get told, you know what, if you get us close, that's not too bad. It's your first year, not your players. I really think we've delayed everything another year again. So, like I said, Madge planted the seeds. Let him cultivate them. Let him live and die by that. And really, that's the vision that Lee and Justin and everyone's been alluding to. We're a development club, like it's on video, it's on Tiger Town. So, they just change tack all the time, guys, and it's just not a good look. And this is why I've got no faith in them. And as I said, they did good for 12 months, but they've just basically shot themselves in the foot. So I really got no faith in them anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he needs 2 years, which the fans I just don't think have enough patience for, and the board certainly won't. So.
No, I think probably just over half of us. I think probably about 60%, from what I can tell from social media activity, some surveys that have been done and stuff like that, are still pretty keen on Madge. So
yeah,
there's a few.
I feel like we're towing the line though, Rob. Like guys like your pod and our pod, we're the ones trying to push some reason as to, like, you get rid of Madge if there's something, like if Bellamy wants to come, different story, but.
But even then, I made the point the other day to Buzz. It's probably something I could quickly tap into, but I think the bigger issue here is the NRL itself by allowing the pooling of players. Like, there's just no depth in any of the rosters. The fact that the Roosters can still be in the top 4 with having as many injuries as us, that's the greatest example this year that there's no parity with teams at all. And I'm not going to knock the Roosters for that. They've done a fantastic job in being able to bend the rules to however necessary to create a roster like that. But the governing body at some point has to step in and can't just say, oh well, it's up to you to clean house. It's like, it's like looking at capitalism. Like, I'm not suggesting some socialist redistribution of wealth where all the talent gets redistributed across the league or anything like that. Like, that's ridiculous. But at the same time, we don't let the governments, governing bodies around the world run these countries, because the NRL is a micro economy, you know what I mean? Like, and we don't let capitalism run, unregulated. In my mind, we've got a bit of a monopoly happening at the moment with the top 4 teams, and it's not really a competition. But
Rob, just quick, the problem is too, and I was chatting to someone, I forget who it was on Twitter today, but one of the guys that we follow each other, he goes, we're West Tigers, we love being the underdogs. We've been underdogs all our lives. We only get a few wins every now and then, but this is who we are, etc., etc. And I kind of replied to him, I don't mind if like you're better than me or Brennan's better than me if it's just away by sort of natural attrition.
Yeah.
But when you're a club and a franchise that continually makes mistake after mistake after mistake, it's not acceptable. Like, it's one thing being a victim because just others are better than you, but we make ourselves the victims. And, I'm not going to hash up the old Magpies Balmain thing, but, I know both clubs kind of struggle, but, West of Magpies have always struggled. Like, it's like they almost like they love losing, and it's, I'm going to offend people by saying that. But,
mate, I could get into this for hours, but I won't. Yeah, go down that path. But yeah.
2021, we've got professionals in there, but unfortunately they lack rugby league nous. They don't have that knowledge. And, I don't mind if the Roosters are better than us, because you know what? We spent 9.3 wisely, and they spent, for example, with their TPAs, 13 million wisely. But we don't spend our bloody 9 million odd wisely. I'm not going to swear, we do it to ourselves, and it's not acceptable. And, I don't know. I know you agree with me, Rob. I don't know what Brennan thinks of that, but that's how I see us. We play victim, but we make ourselves a victim. And it's just not on, man. Not on. We deserve better. Like I said, life's too short to be, like, I love this club. I swore I'd never join. Brendan knows this. Brendan's got membership without me. I refused to get membership while Pasco's CEO. And only because, I swore on my late dad that I wouldn't. So I got to stick to that. But that's how offended I was by his treatment of Robbie Farah, which set the tone for our whole club the last 5 years. Every NRL player knows, if you can shit on Robbie Farah, no one is safe. He was a junior. He represented his club, won a premiership, did everything, and he got spat out. So that's the legacy that we've left, and it's terrible. It's just a really bad look.
Yeah, it really is. Just to cap that all off. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you go, mate.
Oh no, I was just going to say I'm with you, and I guess my whole point to sum that up would be, that's the thing. You can't expect change within an organization unless you do something about it. And that's the sad part. This is the first time I've genuinely seen us go down a different path, whether it be not signing, the has-beens, and we're going to the youth. So to me, it's kind of sad that I think the architect behind that, who is Madge, is probably going to cop the fall for it, when he's the first one to have really stripped it back in our organization and done something about it. I mean, all the previous people before him have not. So
completely agree. Yeah, we've really got to stay strong with this path that we're on. I can see the benefit of it. One of the real interesting things that I'll just kind of cap this off with is, have you noticed that the narrative in the last couple of days has flipped? Well, sorry, in the 48-hour period, because we're on such the 24-hour news cycle. They can't just keep on banging on the same thing. So it all started with Madge, pressure on Madge. I've seen actually, it's probably like gone 60-40 now. It's starting to turn a bit. The pressure's been turned onto the board entirely, I think. A lot of pressure on Pascoe. There's a lot of talk about Pascoe in the articles these days, in the last 24 hours. How that's going to affect the end decision may be a bit... I think if Pascoe feels more pressure on himself like that, he's more likely to make a drastic decision. Yeah, I'm not too sure.
I feel like every day Madge survives is putting more heat on Pascoe.
Yeah.
Like, I've gone in really hard. Like Brendan will tell you, I've literally been on social media the most I've ever been in my life, like 4 hours a day, 5 hours a day. I've been lobbying with people. I've rung Lee. I reached out to Madge on Sunday night. I've spoken to player managers. All the feedback I'm getting is Pascoe's the problem. He goes, that's your biggest problem. And just to touch on something with Hartigan that you're not aware of, on the surface, I'm happy with what he's done and the clean outs and the signings and everything like that. I'd give him like an 8.5 out of 10. But the rumor is he does not return phone calls. And I'm talking for like 6 weeks at a time. And players want to know about their future. Managers want to know about their players' futures. All those players talk to each other. They all talk about this guy. He doesn't return your calls. He doesn't look after you. He doesn't do this, doesn't do that. So there's a bad thing going on with Madge. Okay. And not with Madge, with Hartigan. So I just think all that is just unprofessional and a terrible look. And the fact that Pascoe keeps feeding Shamus, as I alluded to earlier, we've got to be better than that. And I made sure Lee knew some of that. I couldn't go too hard at him about Pascoe because they're great mates. But, Lee's not stupid. Like I said to Lee, okay, let's forget how we've gone the last 3 years. Madge has won a premiership, and not just won a premiership, he's been to multiple semi-finals. How many semi-finals has Pascoe been to? So, I would, if I'm going to have faith in someone, I'm going to have faith in someone that's been there and done that.
Got a proven record.
As opposed to as opposed to someone that hasn't done that. And Madge has had 3 years, but his first year, like I said, if we didn't have the miracle of Benji and Robbie coming back, for peanuts, we had like $2.5 million sitting in reserve grade. So how we even got 9th is an act of God. We should have made the finals. And I put that on Benji and Robbie and Maddo, because they were, and maybe Corey Thompson to a degree as well. They were 4 outstanding players that year. But to think that you're going to do well when you're always under the pump with salary cap. Why do we have a young squad this year? Because we had no money to spend. Why did we have no money to spend? Because our cap was stuffed. Why was our cap stuffed? Justin Pascoe. So get to the root of the problem, Or when I say Pascoe, it's Pascoe on the board. I'm not just going to single him out, but he came into our organisation knowing that we were stuffed with back-ended contracts. We were coming off Chris Lawrence's back-ended contract. We were coming off Robbie Farah's back-ended contract. He knew what was going to be the problem. Don't get ourselves in that position again. And, we've done it again. Every time we got a good player or a half-decent player, we lose him. Like I said, Martin Tapau, Bodine Thompson's, Blake Austin's, Ryan Madison. We never have enough money to top them up. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, so that should, I think we've gone on quite a bit about our beloved West Tigers.
We love them too much.
I know, mate, I know. I could literally talk about them for hours and hours on end.
Exactly.
So that'll kind of wrap us up there with that. Hopefully in the next week or so we get a bit more clarity. By the next pod we can understand what's happening with the board or Madge, and we know what's happening moving forward. I just don't want this dragged on and on and on. It's like, you'd be forgiven for forgetting that there was probably arguably the best game of the season being played on Friday night. But, it's like...
Just quickly, I think you might be able to confirm it, that I think he said on that radio that if we should have, pretty much the results of that review will be in by later next week. So it'll be pretty close.
I don't remember the time frame, but what I did take note of, which he hadn't said to me over the phone, is we're going to do a full, lengthy review and take our time. So, but like I said, when
I saw a quote about the end of next week, but go on.
Okay, well, like I say, if it can go on another week, I'm telling you, Pascoe's going to regret the day he started this investigation, because it's going to come back and that bullet's going to hit him straight through the chest.
Yeah.
I agree. I just, I don't mind how long they take, as long as we don't get hourly updates from the press. That's all I care about at the moment, for God's sake.
Can't avoid it.
Okay, so, go the Tigers next year. Let's move on now. Okay, so, as I said before, mentioned, we have our finals starting, and we have the top 8. So, we had some Smokies roll in there in the top 8. We have Newcastle. There was a great meme the other day that had the percentages. Someone put up a picture, and they'd also put in the percentages of the teams. I'll probably throw a clip up on the vid. Anyway, they had the percentages of the teams and how they're probably going to go this weekend, like their chances. I think Melbourne was at like 37.5%. Penrith was at like 27.5%. Manly at about 7.5%. And then it had, who was the other team there? It had...
Probably South or Para.
No, it had Souths at about 12%. The funny one was it had Titans at 2.5%. And then it just had LOL written across Newcastle. So that was funny. Laugh out loud, so. And that's fair enough after their performance last weekend. So.
We'll get into their game a bit later, but I said on the pod last week, I think they're, regardless of whether the Sharks or Titans got 8th, I said they were going to be the worst team in the finals. So.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. So, brings us to our first game, which is on Friday night. We have the Storm versus Manly. I kind of alluded to this before, that it's arguably going to be the game of the year at this point. So what are your thoughts, guys? I'll get you started.
Yeah, I might kick it off. So all week I've sort of been favouring Melbourne at 13+ in the sense of, I don't know, I don't know if it's because the hype around Manly's gotten so large that I sort of wouldn't mind seeing them fall a bit flat on their face. But the more news that comes out of their camp, I mean, they're missing the Fox, and I think Munster's in a bit of doubt as well. The more I start to buy into the Manly hype. In saying that, I'm going to tip Melbourne. I'm going to say it's going to be pretty close. It'll be a 1-12-ish type game. I was looking at it, though. The whole thing with me where Manly, it's going to come undone for them is, I'll get your guys' thoughts on this, but after Turbo, who's obviously going to be the best on park regardless of whichever team they play, I think Melbourne might like legit have the next 6 best players on the park. Like between Pappenhausen, Munster, Jerome Hughes, Brandon Smith, and Harry Grant and Nico Hines who are on the bench, like they could just come in the middle of that first half when the fatigue starts to set in, and they could just cause some absolute havoc. So I know there's a lot of support going behind Manly, and they're sort of the hot team to tip. But yeah, I'm all over Melbourne 1-12.
Yeah. Now, I'm actually kind of a bit on Manly on this one. So I was looking at the back lines. There's a lot of strike power in the Manly back line compared to the Melbourne back line. So, like, some of the matchups there are insane. Like, Pap and Turbo, I think Turbo's got the edge there. They don't really cancel each other out in a sense. Turbo's definitely got the edge there. Saab, Harper, Garrick, compared to Jennings. Like, Remus Smith has been playing really good football this year. Justin Olam's a bit of a weapon. He's a tank as he runs. But, yeah, I just see more points in the Manly back line. I think it's going to be a game of attrition in the forwards. It's going to really determine this one, and who's going to get the most space and off that forward momentum to, work with their back lines a lot in this. I'm tending to lean a lot towards Manly on this, although it's very, very hard to tip against Melbourne. And I'm a huge fan of Harry Grant. Obviously, he's really endeared himself to a time when he was with us at the Tigers, to me. But, I'm going to have to stick with Manly. Like, I'm not really going much on the point spread on this. I'm just looking at the win-loss. And, it's going to be a tight game, but I think Manly might just do them in the end, mate. Yeah, that's going to be my tip and my pick anyway. So, what do you reckon, Rob?
Look, I can't go past Melbourne. I'd take both your points. Brendan, I think what you said about like the back line, or what Rob said about the back line as well, have you guys thought about the wingers themselves? Because I think Manly have got quite a bit of a height advantage on the wingers. So I kind of feel that Manly might use the bomb quite a bit to those wingers. So when you look at the teams, one other thing you said, sorry, Brendan, that's what I wanted to say, forgetting what my thoughts here, about Cameron Munster, the fact that, like you said, Nico Hines is on the bench. That's why they'll have that risk and play him. And if something goes wrong with Munster, Nico Hines comes on. They don't miss a beat there. I think that they've got to play Smith and Grant with that 1-2 punch, and I think they'll try and roll them. If you're a Manly guy, Rob, I'd be going Melbourne half-time, Manly full-time, because I just feel like Melbourne always get off to a good start and they generally slow down in the second half no matter what. But Melbourne are going to try and strangle them. I don't know what the scoreline could be. I could easily see an 18-6 sort of score, and I could also see a 30-18 sort of score. It could go any way, but I know Manly will just start playing jungle ball if they get 12 to 18 points behind, and with the Schusters of the world and Daly Cherry Evans and Turbo, and
they can really unpredictable.
It becomes really unpredictable, and they've got the Lumi on one wing and George Jennings on another wing. Like Lumi hasn't played that many first grade games. I'm assuming George Jennings is going to take the left hand wing. So if Jennings does take that left hand wing, there's such a height advantage for Saab over Jennings. So
I'd be exploiting that.
So obviously Melbourne are just going to try and play that field position game, and I think Melbourne and Penrith have just got the highest forward motors in the game. Like, they can go hard for 80 minutes in the forwards. So I think Manly aren't going to know what hit them really. I was actually surprised they started with Josh Alloway, but we'll see how that all pans out. But it should be a cracking game. And the one funny thing to the 2005 Tigers is when Manly do throw it around, they kind of look a bit like us. So I love watching them play. So I just love watching good rugby league. But I'll go with Melbourne.
I was going to say, just before we go off that game, I think you're right. It is going to be a stranglehold type of game. And then I just think if you throw in the class, every time I look at Melbourne's team every week and I see Hines and Grant on a bench, I'm just like, how do you beat that? Like, if they're down, the 20-minute mark, they can just inject so much. And if they're up, they're just like, the momentum's never going to stop. So, I just think they can really get rolling, Melbourne.
Yeah, that's where they are going to win the game. Like you both mentioned, it's going to be with the hookers and the forward momentum it gives them. And Smith coming off the bench is a weapon. But like I said, and you kind of alluded to, Rob, if they really exploit the wingers for Melbourne with their height and the speed they've got as well, that's going to be a very, very interesting game, very, very close. So yeah,
Certainly will.
yeah, that's why I kind of like, without missing, with Munster being, if they had Addo Carr in the team and Munster was 100%, I could not back Melbourne. I'd back them 100% of the time. But yeah, I just think there's a bit of an X factor there with Tommy, and anything can go down. So yeah. Okay, that brings us up to our next game. We have on Saturday night the Sombreros taking on the Titans.
Yeah.
So we have the Roosters, the amazing, incomparable Roosters, who somehow managed to work their way into the finals on this second string reserve grade side, which would face it be a first grade side in any other team in the comp. So yeah, so they have some big ins this week. They have Warrior Hargraves is back, Victor Radley is back, Dale Copley and Ben Thompson. So Thompson's been named on the reserves, and so is Copley. But yeah, they're massive injections back with Victor Radley especially. So yeah, I think this is going to be a open shut case myself. I'm going with the Roosters for this one. The Titans did play a fantastic game last week, but let's face it, they were playing the Warriors, and yeah, they were going on a bit of a tear. They look like a bit flat track bullies at times, but in the back end of that game, they're having a lot of fun. Jaden Campbell is an absolute X factor, but yeah, he's facing James Tedesco, and yeah, some pretty impressive. That was a pretty impressive game that they played last weekend, the Roosters. I think I tipped against them last weekend, Brendan. Regretted it very quickly when I was watching that game. That was just the way it was unfolding. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is not how I expected it to go at all. So, who have you got, mate?
I've got the Roosters. I can sort of see this game a bit similar to how you saw the Melbourne Manly one. Like, I actually think Titans have a lot of points in them. But yeah, with the inclusions the Roosters have back, I just trust them a lot more. The only weird thing I've noted down is Sam Walker on the bench is a bit surprising. And I saw people alluding to the fact that their last game they played was like 35-34. I think Sam Walker had to kick a winning field goal at the death there. But I went back and looked at that game, and Tedesco wasn't playing. And as someone who's been a big-time Supercoach player for the last decade, Tedesco, for some reason, I don't know why, I've just got in my mind, he seems to just always destroy the Titans. And I think they've been soft at the best of times this year. So I'm with you. I'm going to shut the door on the Titans here. I think the Roosters get it done pretty easy.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brendan. I think the Roosters get it done pretty easily, but I will put a little caveat on that. If the Titans can put some scoreboard pressure on them, I could see it going the other way. But I think, you look at the Titans roster, they've got a really good roster, but they just have this soft underbelly. And when they get behind, they fall apart. So I feel like if the Roosters get on top early, they might get some consolation tries, and you could have like a 42-18 sort of score. Yeah. But if the Titans get ahead early, and then Fafita decides to play like Gigantor, like he does every week, and they get their tails up, that, like Rob said, that Jaden Campbell, he's amazing. Like some of these young fullbacks that have come up at the end of this last few weeks is incredible.
The fullback for sure.
Oh, we had, like I was saying, we had 10 good fullbacks, and we got now Campbell, who's come out of nowhere, and Sloan for St. George, and I still don't know his name, but the Canberra fullback that got injured a few weeks ago, I can't remember his name. I think
Xavier Savage.
Yeah, like he just runs like a beast. I'm thinking, where's all this talent coming from? It's so good to watch. So the fullback stocks are really in good place. But yeah, I just think Gold Coast have got the players to beat them, and certainly if the Roosters have a bad night or they get a bit down, they could fall apart. But I can't see that happening. They got Tedesco, they got so many class players. Josh Morris is in the centres, and Radley and Warrior Hargraves, and solid back rowers. So I think it should be the Roosters.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty hard for him to get knocked over by the Titans. Yeah. Okay, so Saturday we have Penrith versus the Bunnies. Okay, I think it's going to be a bit of a tall ask for the Bunnies to get the win in this one. I expected them, obviously, when I made the pick of them being my favourite earlier on in the season that did expect, obviously, Latrell to be there. So missing him is going to be massive for them. It was going to be a tall ask for him as it was with Latrell. So he's just too much of a missing X factor for him to, I think, get over them. I do like the smoke and mirrors tactic that Bennett is employing with the fullback. You'll probably touch on this, Rob, but I don't actually think that, he has named Taft, but I think we'll find Cody Walker there in my mind. I think it's a bit of a smoke and mirrors ploy myself, and Benji will be utilised a lot more than he usually has been.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think it's going to come down to, I don't know what you guys think, but for me, Penrith play this such a high-powered game, yet if you take Luai out of the equation, it's high-powered, but it's risk-free. So they always look like they're going to score. They always look like, they put grubber kicks. They're threatening to go over the line, and they'll do repeat sets. But, you go 25 minutes into a game and it's 6-0. Like, Penrith haven't got much to show for it. So I just think they play this high-pressure game. So if South can somehow hold him in the forwards, get some field position, they'd be a chance. I just don't think South can match them, although their forwards have kind of pulled their finger out the last 6 weeks. They're not as soft as what I thought they were earlier. I think they've really hardened up. You got to allow for the Bennett factor. And just finally, Cleary's kicking game is obviously second to none. That's why you have to have Cody Walker at fullback. His anticipation is second to none. Taft dropped a couple of simple balls against St George last Friday night. So, it's just a no-brainer for me. If he runs out with Taft, then he'll know why he's going to lose. And I'm not saying Taft's a good player, and he looked good in attack. He looked good with the ball. I just think because Penrith play a conservative game and a high percentage game, you've got to take those little drop balls and, things out of their game so they don't win easily, because if they get ahead early, Penrith, they'll just squash you. Their defence is really good. I don't see, I think one good thing for South, though, is South's left edge is fantastic and Penrith's right edge isn't the greatest, but they've got to get in a position on the field to be able to execute those plays. So we'll see how it goes. But no, Penrith for me, but I don't know. I've changed my mind on this a couple of times the last 24 hours. I wanted to say like it's a certainty, but I'm just going to say Penrith. I don't know. If South could spring an upset, but I'm not expecting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with it, but yeah.
Yeah. I think you summed it up pretty early on there, though, when you said, can South match him in the forwards? And my simple answer is no. I think you saw last time they played them, I tipped South. South came out and, I tipped Penrith, but then in my tipping comp, I tipped South. So I was excited for that first little bit. But they came out and blitzed them, and they still couldn't get it done. And that was with Latrell. I'm with you. I think Cody Walker has to be at 1, and I think Benji should be in there at 6. Like you said about their high-pressure game, and they're just going to pin you in corners. Like, I can't think of 2 better players. Like, if you put Reynolds, Marshall, Walker, that's a very experienced spine, along with Damien Cook. Like, they're the types of players that can sort of break it down if it does become a real slow and grind of a game. But I honestly don't think you could take Penrith by enough this week. I think they're really going to put it to South. You're right, their forwards have been performing better the last month or so, but they've got Tavita Pangai coming off the bench, and I don't know, Penrith just, like you said, if they just get a sniff early, I think they're gonna kill them. So
just remember too, with Latrell being out, like that's huge, and that's probably the difference in the game. But that night that Penrith just got away with South, I think the penalties was something like 11-2. I stand corrected, but it was pretty one-sided. So
I was about to touch on that.
If it's an even penalty count, I mean, it could be a different game. But for me, I just think if Luai decides to play Luai football, like it's lights out, because he is so creative, and he hasn't really shown much of that since Origin. So I'm expecting Luai to, run like mad this week and turn it on. So yeah, Penrith for me for sure. What are your thoughts, Rob?
Just a point you're alluding to before. It was about Penrith. The 6 points after 20 minutes. They're down by 6 points. They're up by 6 points generally. It doesn't seem like they've got that big lead, but they've kind of already won the game in attrition by that point. I know the scoreboard isn't showing it, but you can see the other team at that point. They're so beaten down trying to keep in contact with the pace and the contact of the game that's happening, the impacts. Yeah, and the last time they played, there was some dodgy officiating. We can all kind of acknowledge that now, that there was some calls that haven't been called all year. When I watched it, I did make the point, I think, on the pod when I was on there, that it was like watching the Tigers be officiated, because I often make the point that we are the most scrutinised team on and off the field. But it's like there was that the downtown penalty. Now, guess what? Last weekend, same player, he did exceed the zone where he was, and he was in the next play, he made a tackle. But because a try didn't come of it, they didn't call the downtown penalty. And I'm just like, mate, there's no consistency in this thing at all. Like, I've noticed, I think a few times now, that downtown penalty has not been called since, and it wasn't called before. It was just this bizarre little moment in the game. It's like, why are you just being over scrutinising them and not the other teams? Yeah, and Penrith was getting the 50-50 calls that night, so, which is odd because they're both top 4 teams. You know, my little gripe about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it has it has the capabilities of being like a bit of a amazing game. And the other thing is too, they've got safer wingers this time. If you can remember last time, I think it was Mansour got absolutely. I think he would have had nightmares for probably still having nightmares after what was happening to him that night. That was. Yeah, Nathan Cleary took him apart. Took him apart indeed. So yeah. Did you give your take on that one, Brendan? I can't remember.
On Mansour?
On that game just then? Yeah, sweet. Okay, that moves us on to.
You said Penrith by panels.
Oh, yeah. I was saying, I actually don't think you could tip Penrith by enough. So.
Yeah, true, probably.
I think they're going to romp them.
That's the likely scenario, but yeah, like I said, if we get partial officiating, and we have it's like I said, it's going to be really difficult without a trail butt. So yeah. And that brings us to Sunday. So we have the Eels taking on the Knights. As much as it pains me, as you know, to tip the Eels, it's going to be pretty impossible not to tip them. They have set out Madison, interestingly enough. They're going to rest him for another week, so they don't feel like Newcastle is basically necessarily. They need to roll out their fullest strength team, but they have nearly gone full strength with it, with the team they've rolled out. So, yeah, what are your thoughts, guys? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just on the Madison thing, I'm not too sure. Is that like I know his name's 18th man, but I'd be curious to see if they do put him in. But I'm with you. I touched on it a week or two ago with Parramatta. They define flat track bullies, and they will just beat up any team that is shit, to be perfectly honest. And that's exactly what I think Newcastle are. So pretty similar to Penrith. I don't think you can tip Para by enough. They showed some good form as well against Melbourne, which was surprising. And the Knights have just been awful. Like, they've been awful all year, and it's strange because I'll get your thoughts on it as well, Dad, when I throw it over to you. But I think they've got a really talented roster, and it's actually pretty well balanced, like between the forwards and the spine. Like, they got enough experience with Ponga and Pearce, and actually Clifford's played all right since he's got there. But it's just something hasn't clicked, and I think that really showed when they played the Broncos. Was it last week or the week before? Like they were just terrible against them. I think that could have just been the week that just passed. So
it was.
I'm with you. I can't overlook Para. Like Para, I actually trust them, like maybe even more so than the Roosters when it comes to just beating down these bad teams. So I think Para get the job done pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a weird one for me. I've got a few things to say prior to that game. I found it weird that Para rested their players last week. I thought that the fact that they beat Melbourne and would have just been a massive injection for them of confidence, that it was worth playing their guys last round and make a statement to the comp, and sort of say, hey, we're here, we're going to be a force in the semi. So I hope they can find that form. I hope they can find that form when they do play. What you said, Brendan, about Newcastle's side, I looked at the 17. You can't fault it. Like, it's actually a really good 17. But if you look at their form the last few weeks, and I'll even go back to the Cronulla game. The Cronulla game, they were rubbish. The Gold Coast game, they were rubbish. The Brisbane game, they were rubbish. And like when they got to 24 points and had the final spot wrapped up 2 weeks ago, I'm like, they really don't deserve to be there. Like they've kind of Bradbeed their way in. And so, look, if Kalen Ponga shows up and does what I'd love him to do, and like not all this take the line on stuff, but when he's like 2 in from the edge and he does that face ball out to the winger, either side, like Parramatta have this penchant of where their wingers stand too far in. So I can actually see if Newcastle actually show up with a brain this weekend, they could tear them apart on the edges. But you got to trust Para. I mean, Para have just got a good pack, and I'm not a fan of Kurt Mann being in the centres. So I think you find a couple of the Para big boppers running at Kurt Mann on the edge there. So I'll go Para probably. I'm going to say just because it's a semi-final, like 10 points. But if it was a regular season game, I'd probably say 24 points. But I just think semi-finals, you get nervous, you get a bit conservative when you get big leads. And, Para will just probably try and grind them with the Moses kicking game. So, yeah, I'll go Parramatta. But I don't know how Newcastle got there. But that said, Ponga's a freak. And if he decides to play, I just want to see him play. I don't care if Newcastle lose. I want him to get the ball as many times as he can and run and pass and just bamboozle Para.
Yeah. Just to touch as well before I forget, on that point you made about them not keeping the momentum up and playing their starters against Penrith last week, I just wonder if they took into account, though, because they were playing for a top 4 spot, if my memory serves me correctly. Like, if they won, would they have overtaken Manly? Or I think they would have.
I think they no, I'm not sure. Well,
but they were playing Penrith.
At that stage, they had a chance to make the top 4 if Manly had lost or whatnot.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I just wonder if they took into account, we really got up against Melbourne. If we could, even if they got up against Penrith, they've then got to play Penrith again in the 1v4 the next week. I just wonder if they thought 3 weeks in a row against Melbourne, Penrith might take a bit too much out of them.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, and maybe
I never looked at it that way. I never looked at it that way. That's a really good point. But to lose by, what did they lose by? 40-6?
They lost 40, like that. And to be honest, they were in there. Penrith were off their game that first half. They were in it for a while. But in my eyes, I think, I'm not saying it's a smart thing. I just think that's the way they were thinking. They were probably thinking, you know what, like they knew they were going to belt Newcastle, or if they played the 8th team.
Clippers dodging the Lakers.
That's it, yeah, something like that. So, they're sort of just stacking the bracket that way. And now I think, so they finished 6th. They're going to get South, assuming Penrith beat South and they beat Newcastle. They probably looked at it like, you know what, that's 2 very winnable games. South without Latrell and Newcastle. So I actually don't think it was the worst thing they did, but I'm with you. It was a surprise. Like, they really could have made a statement to go beat the Storm and then beat Penrith again.
Yeah.
What do you think of their compressed defence? Like, Para's, like, they've always got their winger like standing near the 20-metre hash mark.
You touched on it. We were sort of throwing around some same game multis and whatnot before the Penrith game, and I sort of said To'o for a hat trick, and I actually said he should score 7 tries, and he scored a hat trick.
He said something like that.
And because you sort of alluded on it as well, like Hayes Dunster's just standing like 15 metres in off his line, and they do some weird things, but I don't know. Things just seem to fall Parramatta's way when they play bad teams, and I don't know. They're just the team. I've been like this all year with them, and I was like this with them last year as well. They're flat track bullies. They've got a very high floor, but I don't think their ceiling is as high as like a Manly or a Roosters. So I just think I know what they are. At best, they're a preliminary final team. They'll probably bow out in the second week. It depends. But yeah. On the edge thing, I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's coached. A lot of wingers do that now with the block shape, and they all jam in on the fullbacks. And yeah, I can't really give an answer to that. But I'm with you. I have noticed that their edge defense is pretty ordinary.
Well, if anyone's going to expose it, it's Ponga. But yeah, I can't go past Para. Just, if your life depended on it, you'd say Para, which is pretty sad to say. Like 4 weeks ago, they wanted the coach. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, it's insane, actually.
What are your thoughts, Rob?
They're pretty crazy Para fans, aren't they? How they wanted the coach's head a couple of weeks ago, and now they're like, "Oh, Brad Arthur's the man; he'll get us there." They're bipolar a bit in that sense. I was actually kind of just having a look at the Newcastle side just then, and mate, they've got some X factors across that side. They've got the Safidi brothers, they've got Frizzell, they've got Pearce, who can manage a game, like as much as he has his issues off the field. Mitchell Pearce is a decent football player. We have Callum Ponga, and Bradman Best could be exploiting that edge like you're talking about. So Bradman Best is an absolute weapon. I've seen him play live at Newcastle a few times. That kid is he's a cannonball. He seems impossible to put down.
Hard runner.
Oh yeah, real hard runner.
Yeah, but that's the thing, Rob. Like Dad was sort of touched on. I feel like that every week when I look at their team, and then I just see the performances they dish up against like a Cronulla or a Gold Coast who are fighting.
Funny thing is, but
like at that time for the 8th spot, like they're just so ordinary, and I can't explain it.
The funny thing is about Newcastle is they do get up for their rivals, okay, and they do have that history of playing Parramatta in the grand final, and they do have that history with Manly. If you've noticed, every time they do play them teams, it's like a different team's playing from the previous week. So I'm not sure if that's going to play into it at all. Like, do you know how these rivalries sometimes they do lift teams, and you see completely different teams? Like the greatest example is the Tigers last week compared to the Tigers the week before when they played against nearly a full-strength Penrith. And then they didn't even bother showing up for Canterbury the following week. So there's definitely a rivalry there that's brewed between the players and the playing groups, within them two clubs. So it's like, I wonder if that's going to continue on there. But just looking at the bench, with Cartwright and Papali'i coming off the bench, that's too much talent and power to inject into a game. And they have Clemmer, and Brody Jones, King, Suaso, Sue.
Clemmer is in doubt.
Clemmer's in doubt there. So
I'm not sure he'll play.
Jones can play. He's a beast.
Yeah.
Brody Jones.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. So.
But wouldn't it be funny if Parramatta lost and then the knives are out for Parra because, hey, even the West Tigers beat Newcastle twice this year.
Yeah.
It'd be glorious. It'd take some heat off us for a week at least. Arthur would be clopping it left, right, and centre.
At least for about an hour or two.
Yeah, at least.
Well, to be honest, whichever team loses that match, I think their coach should be copping it. I don't know what your thought. I don't want to make this a Newcastle episode, but I don't think Adam O'Brien is anything to what he was meant to be. Like, he was meant to be the guy that came from the Melbourne system and the Roosters system, and I think he's been pretty terrible in his stint there. So,
they give Madge a lot of crap for looking like he doesn't have answers sometimes. But if you ask me, Adam O'Brien and who's the other bloke they were talking about with the Tigers, the former Cowboys? What's his name? Paul Green. They're the two blokes who, when they're in press conferences, they look like they have no idea why their team lost. You know what I mean? So they don't really fill me with any confidence in their coaching ability. And when you put up that bloody Photoshop thing of Paul Green last night, I think I'm Discord.
Oh, you better hear what it was.
I could all I could say I think was like just adding another clown to the circus, eh? It's like
you're gonna have to put that photo up over this.
For sure. Yeah, that rounds us up a bit. So just to recap, I've gone with Manly. You guys both picked the Storm. Not sure how I think that's a bit of a roughie on my pick. That's why I've got it. I like to hedge my bets a little bit. But, it was very hard picking against Melbourne. We've all gone the Roosters. It's going to be pretty hard to see the Titans do anything. Rob, you did mention that if the Titans get a start on, but I remember there was a time this year when they got out to a 24-0 lead and ended up losing the game 48-24, didn't they?
Yeah, I think that was South Sydney.
Yeah.
They were up something 24-8 or something like that. And also against the Roosters, like when Brendan said they won in Golden Point, not Golden Point, but just with a late field goal, I think they were up by like 4 converted tries or thereabouts.
At one point.
Yeah, I think 34-10.
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole game. I just remember thinking the game was over and then looked back and all I could see was Sam Walker jumping up. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, isn't it a thrashing? So I kind of missed the second half a little bit and missed the best part of the game.
Yeah.
If you remember, I think we were actually on the golf course. We were up at Magenta. So.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think as well, correct me if I'm wrong, they might have done the same thing against Brisbane at the start of the year. I think Brisbane's first win, didn't they come back from 20 against the Titans?
I think they did too.
So, yeah, they've got a bit of a knack of blowing the lead.
Yeah,
and
so I haven't got total confidence in keeping that lead.
On a side note, that was the first time that Sam Walker ran backwards into touch because you told me about it. Okay, and remember they made a big deal about it later when I think was it Parramatta or was it at least at Bankwest Stadium, he ran back like 90 metres.
Yeah, that was the length of the field one. That it was a bit more noticeable, just a bit.
Yeah, just a little bit different.
Yeah.
Smart play anyway, I reckon.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with it.
He copped some stick for it, but it was a lot of old heads. Who really cares? Yeah.
It's the right play.
Yeah. No one was going to catch him. He knew it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, and then we went to Panthers and Rabbitohs. I'm pretty sure we've all picked the Panthers there, although we do think that the Rabbitohs could be a smoky depending on the tactical choices of Wayne Bennett on the night.
Yeah, Penrith for me.
Yeah. And then we have Newcastle and the Eels. We've all gone the Eels, I believe, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. I know you would be, Brendan. You have no faith in Newcastle at all.
I think the last 2 games are the biggest blowout. I actually we'll revisit it next week on the pod, but I'm going to go early and say that those 2 winning margins combined will be like 40 to 50 combined. I reckon they'll both win by 20-ish.
Wow.
So we'll revisit that, and that's not just me trying to make a hot take. I dead set think they could both win by 20 to 30 points. So
He's called it. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you checked the weather up there to make sure it's not raining, Brendan?
Yeah,
It could be wet. You never know.
But what you were saying about how if it was a regular season, you think they'd do them. I think it would, regardless of the occasion, they're going to do Newcastle. And then, I think I'm with you. I think it could be close to early, but Penrith will run away with that by like 16 to 20-ish. So,
yeah.
Luai, best player on the field. Cleary to get man of the match, though, because he's loved by the media.
But yeah, calling it now, I will take minus 39.5 on those 2 games combined, Penrith and Para.
Just display Brendan's number later, and they can. Some people can ring you up for some bets.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
At least you're confident, mate. I can't be confident on anything, mate. Really, even the Melbourne Manly game's hard. Like they're all hard.
That's the closest one. That's the 1 to 12 game I have. I think the rest are 13 pluses, but I think the Penrith and Para are like 19 plus material. So.
Yeah.
We'll revisit that next week.
My big hot take, I don't know how big of a hot take it is. It's a bit safe if you ask me. Tommy Turbo gets a double against the Storm this Friday night. Yeah, so
I'll give that a hot take. That's a hot take against Melbourne.
Yeah, I think he's up for it, mate. After what he was doing last week, that was ridiculous. Some of the tries he was scoring last weekend. Did you see that 10 tackle bust in one play?
Just a side note, I was going to say, Dad saw that for the first time last night.
Really?
I could not believe it.
It was ridiculous. I was watching a live going, are you kidding me? There's an even better part, right? So you know the very, very final try? The final try that was scored?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're talking about? Yeah, the whole 100-metre one. So there's a clip on, I'll try and find it to put it over. There's a clip.
Kids that lost the bet.
Did you see that? I saw it. Yeah, they would have won $6,000, I think. They'd chosen the amount of tries scored, all the try scorers and everything, and they just needed the game to end. And they're saying, "Oh, the ball's going to go dead," and then Garrick's picked it up, and you should see them. Like the emotions they go through as this 100-metre score, this try gets scored. They're like, no, and he throws it in the end. It's just like when Turbo scores, it's amazing.
If that was an American football game or basketball game, like that would just be called unsportsmanlike conduct almost. You know what I mean? Like, you normally run the clock out. Like imagine Turbo pulled a hamstring diving for the ball on a play that meant nothing on for and against, nothing on the ladder, nothing for anything.
Yeah.
It's just really, it was a great try to watch. But I'll just tell you something really funny about that that Turbo try where he beat 10 tackles. So I'm sitting in the lounge room watching the game. I've seen Turbo. I thought he got tackled. I've looked down at my phone. I've looked up like 10 seconds later and I've seen Manly scored. And it's only last night that I realised it was on the same play. I thought Turbo got tackled. Like they've gone out to the right, Turbo stayed alive from the play the ball and got the ball or something. I just wasn't even watching. I couldn't believe it was
that's what I was saying. Because I was obviously watching it with you last night and I was seeing your reaction and I was like, you saw this. I was like, why is this?
Yeah, but that's why I didn't see it. I looked down at my phone and then all of a sudden he's over the line. I thought it had to be a different tackle. Couldn't have. There were 3 guys on him. It was crazy.
There was some good efforts in there, mate. They weren't just all like shirt grabbing. Yeah. Hey, there was some decent efforts in there and he was making them look like under 12s. The guy's a phenom. Hey,
well,
absolute
I don't know
phenom.
if you guys caught the Matty Johns podcast, but Cooper Cronk obviously has a lot to do with the Storm still.
Yeah.
And he was saying if he's like setting the defense for Manly, he's double teaming Turbo.
Yeah.
He's giving him an overlap somewhere else. So to use your basketball analogies. So he's just going to make sure Turbo does nothing and you can live and die by going to the right edge of Morgan Harper and Saab or something like that. But if Manly beat him without using Turbo, that's the way he'd go about it. He would just make sure Turbo, easier said than done, but that's what they're going to try and do to him.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I actually saw that happening in the Super League the other week when I watched the Leeds and the Wigan game. they'd realised that Jackson Hastings was the only attacking threat on the field, and they were double teaming and triple teaming, like surrounding him so he couldn't get an offload. They didn't even try to tackle him. They just made sure that they created this kind of bubble around him to prevent him from creating any attack, and because there was no other threats on the field. So it's like, but there is a lot of other threats on the field with Manly, so they're going to have to be careful what they do give up and where they give it up. So
yeah, certainly, no, definitely, guys.
Okay, so that kind of brings us to a wrap for the NRL talk for the week. Great to have you on, Rob. Really appreciate your time and your input.
Thanks for inviting me on, guys. Much appreciated.
You're always welcome. Welcome back anytime. Maybe talk about the grand final in a couple of weeks when it's coming up. So,
whenever you want to get me on, you let me know. I'm always available for you.
Awesome. Okay then. And again, thanks again, Brendan.
No, anytime.
Not a problem.
We'll revisit that 39.5. I'll be riding that dearly this week.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, hot take indeed. Okay, guys.
Right, guys.
That's us for the week. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon, and follow us on the socials. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like our videos. And on Podbean, follow us as well. Okay. Thanks again. See ya. Thank you again for listening to the Bounce to the Ball podcast. You can contact us via email on thebouncetotheball@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at TBOTB podcast. And you can watch us on the Bounce to the Ball YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and to like our videos. Also, be sure to follow us if you're listening to us on Podbean.